Hello, this is Lisa Lee and welcome to my channel. So we are back with the second part to the original reading. I think it was titled Entering into an Era of Freedom, a Channeled Message with Odin. And so I just meditated and brought us right back into the space with Odin. And I'm really excited for this message, and I'm really enjoying Odin as a presence in my life at this moment, because this has been a very really healing message for me as well. And so where we're going to pick up is I left this as it was. I put a whole covering on the space. I consecrated it. So this is where we were, and we're right back. And where Odin left us off, we were talking about what it means to take off this heavy weighted armor around the structures that we have to live in. It's almost like, and I've been talking to Odin about this, I was just kind of continuing to sort of try and have this dialogue about, well, what does it really mean to be free anyway? What is even freedom? If we've been so conditioned, do we even have a sense of freedom any more than we would have a sense of what we want? And so I'm going to actually move the cards off, and I'm going to leave a couple of things here that we're going to focus on. We're going to go, we have the moon and the sun was the last two cards that we pulled. And so we're going to move out of confusion, out of fear, and into clarity and empowerment. And this is all kind of around this idea of taking off this armor that has been imposed over our ability to fully step into that divine expression of creation. So let's move this stuff out of the way. I hope that the video that was just posted found you well. And I'm really looking forward to taking this even farther and getting really into it. So I'm going to move this stuff off. We're going to keep the, the truth of stepping into your power and releasing yourself from slavery, enslavery. He's saying slavery. Every time Odin really refers to our institutions and our systems, he's like, slavery. He's like, by a different name, he's like, capitalism just, he staggers the slavery. It doesn't undo it in any way. And that the lie is often and with the Empress card on the bottom of the deck, I just want to point that out before I shuffle it all back in. Exiting the slavery is you exit through the door of your creativity. And we are conditioned to believe that our creativity is like making a clay pot, or crafting jewelry, or writing a song. But Odin is saying, no, it should be every aspect. The joy you get in creating should go into when you make a meal. It should go into when you make love. It should be when you take a walk with someone, that you create relationships with others. One of the biggest points of creative capacity where we are neglecting these things. So creating community is an enormous role for so many people that is of such importance, and that we need these people to create from that giftedness. And the same way we need others to create music, and others to create others to learn how to use their spiritual gifts. This is all creativity. And so everything that you do should be attended to with a level of divinity, a level of creativity. And that it's not one of the biggest lies is that it's quartered off, that creativity is only for the few, and that it's only in, Odin is saying, creativity in relationship to production and what you can produce and what you can sell. He's like, he's a perversion of creativity. He's like, it's a cheapening. And it means that there's, this idea of, he said it used to be that he's kind of making this distinction between, he's showing me before the flood, this set of beliefs, after the flood, this set of beliefs, and then Christendom. And he has this way in which kind of saying that capitalism as born of the controlled Christendom, separate that from Jesus's message. Actually, it's actually a different, he's like, it's two different religions. He's like, if you don't know that the religion of control and hate is not the religion of the Israeli peoples, and that extension through Christ, he's like, that's not, he's like, let's understand the narratives around you that are meant to cut you off from your creative capacity. He's like that saying that God, you can only get to God through a priest. that you have to go to, that you can't pray on your own. He's like, it was only with Luther that Christians began to like think that they had a direct connection to God. And he's like, but the same is through creativity. He's like, this idea that there's something stopping you from access to your creativity, like the creative fields, and that you can't be creative unless you're operating through the creative fields, and only if you have time to be creative. Like, this is such he's like a perversion on creativity, and he's like, this is consumer creativity, capitalism creativity, enslaving creativity. And I get the word monotheism, and I don't want to in any way offend someone's religion, but I'm channeling Odin, and he's lumping monotheism in with capitalism, consumerism, yeah, he's like all kinds of controls, all kinds of institutions of suppression. And so, and that just threw me off the channel. I want to give a little lesson on channeling. Sometimes when you're channeling, what does it mean to get in the way? Like, I have this fear in the middle of channeling Odin when he says that monotheism is in this category of offending people. And while I really believe that we have to operate from a place of compassion, understanding, and that when we offend people, we want to attend to it from a heart space, that like we don't want to understand that like freedom of speech, I guess I'm just going to go there, we can abuse our freedom of speech, and then we need to be checked on that, because anytime you're just offending people wantonly and you don't have a heart space compassion about the reception of what you're offering, you know, that's a whole issue. But like, separate from that, that this is even another hampering upon creativity, to feel like, he's like, when it comes to free speech, it's not what you say, it's how you react to how people respond to what you say. So if you say something, you know, from a spirit of free speech, which we should all sort of be in the habit of coming through authenticity, like creating as it comes through us, but then also being willing to be wrong is like is also a creative thing, because to be wrong is to learn a new way, to have a different perspective, to discover that you're wrong or to discover that you're right. And discovering that you're right when something you say is tested, you strengthen your position for yourself and others. When you discover that you're wrong, you are collaborating with people and coming into that stronger perspective. It's building something through like a natural selection of like opinions. That's how the dominant viewpoints are established, not by trying to control the speech necessarily, but rather like influencing people in what it means to speak, what it means to be received, what it means to receive based on what you have given. Like, that it's this whole like perversion of control has just filtered into even our like positive movements towards consciousness. And we have to check that, you know, that like we don't have some of those influences of the institutions that we're trying to leave creep into how like what we're trying to create is interpreted. That's an Odin message. And he's like, but you let people, you know, you check people on speaking. He's very intense about words. And so he says, everything you say is a spell. Everything you say weaves something in the way of reality. And so, of course, you check people when they speak from hate and when they speak from separation and when they speak from control. But again, this is supposed to be a discourse, and everything that you present is supposed to enter into a discourse, and it's the receiving is really important. And he's like, the saying a word is just as important as that's how it's received, but one doesn't govern the other. We have to open up about this. So, all right, that's a lot that came through even before we like did anything. So Odin is awesome. So I'm gonna just move this over to here, and you know, in terms of what does it mean to take off this armor, I want to leave these two cards because this is about the struggle. Actually, I want to just move these off. So, you know, where we left off was there's a choice to step into a spiritual maturity related to a new path that is presented, that we make in co-creation with the divine, that calls back the gods of our ancestry, because those stories speak to our giftedness and our way of working our magic. And also in doing that, awakening of these spiritual gifts, awakening of these connections to the deities of your ancestry, that there's also this call to free the other deities. And this is a weird thing that came through in part one, and if you didn't catch part one, a lot of what I'm saying might be, it'll be whatever it is, but I think you should probably watch part one before part two. And basically Odin is saying that we are spiritually responsible for compensation, right? And so he says, you know, the structures that have been built by systems of oppression are in the way of us actually like compensating or making amends for the sins of our ancestors. Like, and this is really interesting, right? Because basically that spiritual responsibility that comes with your words and comes with your deeds and comes with the structures that are created that oppress other people, that, you know, because we're starting spiritually, we're starting with the inside. When we go into these spaces of practice, and we go into learning and creating our craft, and we look at the stories of our ancestors and our lineage, and that's very vast for a lot of people. Not everybody, but a lot of us. Odin says that you also do the spiritual work of any words spoken by my ancestors, any deeds perpetrated by my ancestors that have taken the power, that have taken the gods from other peoples. I now renounce those words, I renounce those deeds, and I release those gods unto their people, and I release those powers back to those peoples. Before you call in your own and think that you can operate like that we have a spiritual responsibility to care about what was done and to care about the hurt that was created and to give back, to pray for, to re-empower from a spiritual place. That doesn't mean like anything to do with currency. At this point, we have problems with structure, but spiritually in your prayer, prayer and spell work is coming across the same with Odin. And in your prayers and in your spell work, you release, you re-empower, and then you call back your gods, and you call back your ancient magic as you release their magic. That we do this together, and that we all do this. We all have to do this in some way, because he said everybody's peoples. He's like, even peoples that didn't have institutional slavery, of which there are some. He says there was even systems within these tribal of taking power from. These tribal, he's showing me there's, he's like wars. He's like these systems of wars, and that's a little thing that came through too. All right, let's move this out of the way. So yeah, part of this new path that you create with your magic should include being empowered, but also releasing power, those powers that were taken back to their people, to find their people. And I don't know exactly what that means, but listen, this is all a journey. Every time I channel a deity, it's a journey. And all of this informs my practice, actually, as I go, the next phase of my learning. I watch these readings, and I take some notes myself. Okay, let's get centered. Let me see if the camera is centered. It does seem like it's kind of dark in here. It's really dark out. So I hope this isn't too bad. I've got the lights all the way up. Do I have the lights all the way up? Yeah, I think it's up as much as, let's just make sure. I should probably do this before I start, but I'm just kind of learning how to do this. All right. All right, let's go out of fear and out of confusion and out of powerlessness and into clarity and a purpose, with letting the tower fall, and battling the demands that are placed on us, that are smaller than us, but that take work to shake off, and removing some of this armor, which is the first part of what it means to make progress. So let's go ahead and let me shuffle this deck, and we'll get more cards on all of that. And Odin wants me to grab the runes, which I left over there. One moment. Okay, sorry about that. I'm going to be sloppy. It's just kind of how I am. So these, I just got these, and they came in a clear bag, which I thought was silly, but let's use them anyway, right? Since we are working with Odin, we'll work with the runes as well. It's funny, he's very soothing, and so he's giving me messages, and as I get them, I'll give them to you. He says, don't be self-conscious. He's like, don't be self-conscious. So when we're making things and we're creating things, we have to sort of, he's like, part of taking the armor off is whenever that self-consciousness over what's created props up, to just, flick it away, because it's small. It's small how people receive your babies. It's interesting. He says, while your words are very important and compassionate communication is required, for any effective communication, he also says that while you're in a channeling mode, to just let the flow be the flow and worry about the reaction when there is one. All right, good advice, Odin. Good advice. Worry about the reaction when there is one is a really good freeing thing for you to tell yourself as you create. That's great. I love it. That should be on like a t-shirt. All right, so this. All right, we got the Lover's card again coming out. That's that new path. And that's the Hangman. At the bottom of the deck, we have the Hierophant. You know, and this really does speak of Odin, like the Holy of Holies, but he's saying more in the way of, he's talking about institutions, and he's saying, you know, bringing the Holy of Holies back into our institutions, and not having the Holy of Holies be a dead god. Like, he's like, our institutions don't save, they don't help, they don't hold up, they don't create community, they don't create anything but division, really. And so he's saying that this is about pulling the Holy of Holies back into these dead. So he shows me the institutions as being a dead god, and he's saying to bring the life back in is to bring the creativity in through our bodies and then into the world. He's saying it's not actually a long process. It doesn't take generations, although it is amazing in generations when we allow for this beautiful flow. And so let me just check and see that this is straight. One of these days I'm going to put tape so that I can just automatically do it. I don't have to like... So with the Moon card and the Judgment card, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to take a sneak peek into, because this is talking about, this is your holy spark, this is your divine spark, and he's saying, look at all of the disgusting, rancorous, like around you, just waiting to devour whatever it is that you put into the world. And he's like, I want you to think about your energy as being like its own ecosystem, and that we have to disempower evil, you know, as it pertains to, he's like, good and evil operate to move progress. Like, they both have to exist. You can't cancel one and go into the delusion and escapism of the other. We want growth, we want tension. But that like this level of evil sort of overpowered, like where you have to go into such a state within, where you have to dig so far within to find that's divine spark, that they're just waiting to eat everything that you produce. High emotions, that it's instigating emotional responses to eat it. And so in order to disempower these energies, he keeps saying like Nephilim, which is interesting. Like, I will study on that at some point and find out. But he's saying that to combat the drives, these are drives basically, like consuming drives. To combat the drives, we first have to starve them. And this is a little bit where the addiction of their energy, like as it attaches to us, where we have to kind of let go of what can feel like power from some of these sources. And, you know, because drive is something that's natural within us, but it can become, when it overwhelms the divine spark, it can become really destructive. But like, it's like, that's why it's an addiction. And so he's saying that right here, we're going to pose some questions about what opposition actually means, and what overcoming that opposition and what starving out those big, he said, enormous demons that feed off of high emotion, that feed off of whatever it is that is produced, and that keep a system of hierarchy in order to like consume and let the consuming continue, and the consuming the consumers. And so what we do, you know, what we're doing as we enter into this new era, and we are entering into this new era, he's like, the prophecies of all peoples are correct. You know, we are moving from one era, you know, we're like literally, this era is moving into where we are right now. We're entering, the doors open. He says, rapture, what is that? Judgment Day, it's a changing of the spiritual guards, basically. And he says, bringing heaven and earth together, you know, as it's foretold. And we're using our common mythology right now. He's talking like through terms of Christianity, because that's what's in the back of my head. But I think it is, all peoples have some level of prophecy in the way of like, and then the new era brings forth this light, brings forth this new period, where we are not enslaved. And it starts spiritually. This is where it starts. It starts in the spiritual body, and it makes its way out. And he says it makes its way out very quickly. It's not something that you have to expect 5 lifetimes from now. He says you will see it. Where you begin it, you will see its ending. And he says, so it's already started. And he's showing me that your connection to your divinity and your heritage is key. But as this era comes in, what Judgment Day is we question all of our judgment. We question the infrastructure. Like, we overcome the false gods basically by bringing these questions to the structure, and the structure crumbles under them. And so first line of defense is in our judgment. And so when we think about success and creating opportunities, and let me go ahead and get some. He says, oh yeah, so supply and demand and creativity. You know, demand will adjust as people have these spiritual transformations. What they want will change. And once what they want will change, what professions are there to aid in their transformation? You know, this is all creative collaboration. And so, like, you'll know what kind of spiritual sustenance you need, and that will be delivered to you. Like, there's this way in which there's an ecosystem of creativity where everyone serves each other and everyone gets compensated, and it's not about consuming, it's about growing together. And so when we change what we want, we change what there is demand for, and when we change what there's demand for, that's how the structure from the bottom row crumbles the entire building. I love it. Let's see where Odin is going with this. And so first we have to ask, what is success and what do we truly want? That's going to be the first, you know, the first doorway out of this oppression of consuming and being consumed. We are going to change what we think we want, what we're hungry for, what we seek for nourishment. And so let's start with what we seek for nourishment now. Okay. All right. Okay, and all right, this is going to be separated. Okay, so what we seek for nourishment now versus this moment after our judgment, after we change our mind, what we would be seeking for nourishment then. Whatever this stone is, I don't actually know, but I think it's orange calcite. It started rattling, probably because my elbows, but still I don't think of synchronicities as being random with these things. So maybe look this up and see what that, just try to make that connection. It's a good way to begin thinking about divination, is when something happens, to try and begin to allow your creativity to help you make connections that, so I would look that up and just see what it means in that moment. Gosh, the Lover's card is just like not gonna quit. I love it. So we first have to tackle fear. Odin is like, for us to even talk about what you guys want and what you would want differently and what would be different nourishment for you to be hungry for before that first step is taken on this path of new inspiration. We first have to confront the fear. And a lot of the questions that came through the other readings like really did deal with this topic of like, how do I overcome the fear in order to do what I'm meant to do? Because the fear has a very powerful hold on everyone. It's meant to. And I'm gonna let Odin just say things that I wouldn't normally. Odin's basically saying, like, when you have a structure that has a god that requires fear for obedience, fear for, you know, any kind of loving relationship, then you're also going to have a situation where the world around that god, you know, has a system. It's like basically saying that God has a series of demons that are working in the position of opposition, you know, with like so there's good and evil, there's God and Satan. Odin's just going to say these things. So when we have like the religion of a God who says there are no other gods, meaning like other peoples are to be enslaved, and so is their inheritance that they have with them. What that God is doing is creating a false duality, where the evil is created for the good to overcome in order to give this God the praise and the glory, but that it's still keeping evil. And so when you go and especially when there are switches between like that God and beginning to like turn towards your ancestral gods, of course, like some of the earliest experiences you're going to have with your ancestral religions is the forces of evil that come in to scare you back. Those aren't forces of evil to show you that that's in fact the real God, but their job is to entice you, to seduce you, to bring you like into this idea that you are connecting with these ancestral gods. But as soon as you get close to any kind of a breakthrough, they bring a scary movie into your dreams, and then you're like, oh wait, I need the authority of the one true God. I need to go back to that religion. I need to contradict all of my instincts and all of my natural like curiosities in order to like avoid the evil spooky. But the evil spooky's job is to fool you. And he's like, so don't underestimate the intelligence that does exist with power structures that want to keep their hold. And when you talk about as above, so below, what you see spiritually and what you see in front of you are always going to mirror each other. And so we are dealing with like the falling of an old power structure. And so with this interest of connecting with the ancestral gods and finding our own magic, which is, again, the pandemic let us be alone with ourselves just long enough to get a hold of this notion that, wait a minute. And some of us had a freedom from this whole, like, there's always been people who are freeing themselves. And that's why we have this tipping point, is because there have been enough of them that have created enough from this divine connection. But that as we have this rise of people wanting to come home to themselves, wanting to come home, wanting to find their gods and connect with them and wanting to have that union, as we do that, you can expect that the fear boogie monsters, whose job is to fool you and then scare you back to a horrible, oppressive, where you would need their authority to be safe and their authority to not suffer and their authority to have an afterlife that was meaningful. I mean, he's like, this is all slave doctrine. And that's not to say that Christianity at its core is, he's like, the Israeli peoples and their belief systems are a result of thousands of years of their evolution. That's for them. And he's like, in Jesus as an extension of that bridges two worlds as having two different parental, I don't know, he's saying Jesus has different parents or something, I don't know, but they're having two worlds. So basically that religion that rose out of the Judaism that became also a Roman religion, that Jesus is fine, Jesus's message, there's no problem with it, but what you have all around that, that's maybe not your God, like that's maybe a tyrannical God that says that no other gods can be besides them. That right there is fruit of a certain poison tree. That doesn't mean that there's not an ultimate authority. There is an ultimate authority, but the passageway to God and to finding that divinity is through your DNA, in a sense, because that's the roadmap of what you've inherited in the way of your magic. And everybody's magic is different, and every family's evolution of magic is different, and then whether or not you've been adopted or you're divorced from your heritage or not, that finding your way back is about curiosity, and that when you have 1,000 gods in your lineage, that you get to have 1,000 gods, to work with. But to think that you have one is to limit you significantly. It is from the inside out, but not quite in the way we think of it. We need to connect with our ancient stories. Our ancient stories lead somewhere, and he's telling me that more ancient stories are forthcoming, and that all of these ancient stories can be channeled by you. And just channeling in general, that's a form of prayer where it's not just one way. There's a reason why channeling was banned, because channeling used to be a form of prayer, either through divination or through chanting or whatever it ended up being, where you get in line with the divine, and not only do you ask questions, but they speak back, and they speak back for everyone. The gods do speak to you. They aren't so divorced that they can't communicate. That's a notion that's very narrow around this idea of shutting down curiosity and access. So when we have this Lover's card, we have this maturity and this gift of making the judgment that this new perspective that will free us. This is about finding freedom. Yeah, this is about finding freedom. And so when we change our perspective, one of the first things that we look at is what we actually want right now, more than anything, is to heal from feeling held back and blinded. And he's like, this is being stuck, not being free, looking at your life and being like, I'd love to spend time creating, but I have to create for somebody else, and have all of my productivity and all of my, like, I need to give it away and in order to have basic needs. And he's like, what we want to get back is to an ecosystem of where you give of your area of giftedness, so that somebody else can give you their area of giftedness, and that there's a trade, and that there's a cycle, and that there's an energetic flow, and that there's a really easy exchange that can be had energetically. There are always jobs that are hard to do, but people who, like, my stomach growling with this whole thing is really funny. I'm not actually hungry right now, but if you hear my stomach growling, it's just the part of channeling Odin for me, is that my stomach grumbles. But basically what I'm being told is that there are systems of exchange that very naturally fall to people in natural ways. He's like, there are people who their systems of giftedness and their areas of giftedness and their creativity is around strategy. It is around working with a group to clean up a space, you know, in a way that brings art and music into it and fun into it. That those are more social jobs, and that they should be social and they should be fun. And if they're not fun, then of course nobody's going to want to do them. But the picking up, you know, is for people who are gifted in bringing a party anywhere and then having the party as this kind of work gets done. It's not for everybody. It should be free will, but this notion that like if we don't have a system of capitalism, then there's always going to be jobs that people don't want. And Odin said, no, there's always going to be jobs that have some creative aspect to them that make them fun, that make people want to do them, and so that they get done. Let's think about it differently. And that's why we're really starting to just like chip away about what some of the doctrine and some of the preaching that we've been told about why we have to have the certain controls. And the lie that says that nobody wants to do the job that is, you know, emptying the sewer. And he's like, if you get a cool suit and it's music and there's like dancing during like the process of doing what would otherwise be very menial labor, and then you get to do this with groups of people that you like and you enjoy, and then, you know, in between shifts you get to like, you know, there's a nice feast set up. He's like, there's ways to make these things appealing that anybody who would want that kind of work, that would want very social work, and that operates in that way, would create for themselves. And see, he's like, don't put a cap on creative potential for solving problems, and don't think that it has to be somebody else's job to solve the problems for you. Like there's this way in which we enter into this the divine creativity answers all questions and solves all problems, and that is the potential of the value of our potential. Like that's the real value of our potential. And so, you know, what we want now, you know, like when we change our mind about what we want, you know, we want to escape so that we can heal, because we feel broken, we feel tired, we feel wronged, we feel that life isn't fair, we feel like we've got a bum deal. And he's saying, you did get a bum deal. And so when we change our mind about what we want, when we no longer say, I no longer want to just escape from the pain of the doing and the being and the having and the pressures and the expectations, and I just want to create whatever like my heart desires in a way that like, yeah, so he's saying, you know, you mature into your roles by finding them through creativity, and that you get really good at what you're doing because you are going to focus on the things that you love the most. Stop it. Look at this. Give me 1 second. I invite everybody to hang out with me, and this is like, we're not going to do like a professional thing. Like I have to get up and deal with my cat. Come here. Could you stop it? We can both lay on that. You can both be there. You know, that came in at the perfect timing, because we are talking about natural competition to a certain degree. So I just had like a cat get upset because, you know, like another cat came up, and I have 2 cats, and I hope my landlord doesn't hear that because I say I have 1, but that's all right. They're expensive. But, you know, I had 1 cat just, you know, try to go on the seat of another cat and try to sit in that same spot, and the cat was like, no, I'm sitting here. That was that whole little hiss. And so there's something to be said about borders and territory separate from, and resources. And he's like, but you know, in the same way we just like debunked the mythology that said that if we don't have capitalism, there are people that won't want to do those jobs, we can also like think about the creative capacity related to borders and resources. And we can get back to that in a second. But Odin did want to bring that in because he says these people are smart enough to ask that question, you know, early in this, and to just say that we will get there. Let me just scoot up. I don't know why my stomach just growls when I'm channeling Odin, but I stopped the reading last night to just like eat something. And now I'm realizing that like this is just the body thing that's happening for me every once in a while when because I'm an oracle, I actually bring this whole thing into my body. And Odin makes my stomach grumble. I'll ask him about that. But he's basically showing me that like, so to refocus me, we want to go from like pleasure, ultimate pleasure, and ultimate where our goals and where we're creating demand is escapism and trying to find healing through that escapism, because the predisposition to that desire is that we're miserable and that there's something to escape and that we don't feel healed, we don't feel healthy, we feel like we're getting sicker in some ways every single day. And he is saying aging, you know, happens because of the grief of lost potential. And he's like, and that's why the more access to potential we have, the longer people live. You know, it didn't used to be that way. He says it used to be that you could live for hundreds of years because you were operating in that creative capacity that didn't lose your potential and didn't age you. And I think he says the wages of sin are death. You know, the wages of consumption is that you will age. It's really interesting. And so when we switch from wanting to escape into a position that says, I obviously don't want to have to make my entire life about, you know, how can I get these escaping moments, escape from the structure, how can I get the secure escape from having to just meet my needs in a way that takes all of my energy, that we say that this is unhealthy and not good, and so therefore we need a new path. And so the desire now has to be a new path out of being condemned, a new path out of being the hangman is stuck. And so the Lover's card is about, you know, making a choice towards difference, moving out of your comfort zone and into a big, expansive world where you get to start to actually influence the world, and you're not just like the child to the parent. And so, you know, Odin is saying that now we really have to point our desire like very firmly, and this is taking the needle out of the vein, point our desire very firmly at getting unstuck. And he's showing me again, like when we release ourselves, you know, and spiritually, when we do that prayer where we say, I release the gods of the people that my people have taken, that it brings like that we begin to understand that like we shouldn't hold certain things, you know, and we shouldn't suppress certain things, because the diversity is beautiful, and the fear of separation based on on people having their own stuff. He's like, there's nothing to that. Like, as long as everyone's given their power, as long as everyone's given their gods. And he's like, and there aren't necessarily controls that say that you can't enter under the mantle of a new culture. Like, of course you can, but there's entering under the mantle of, and it's so we have to begin to think about these things with less fear overall, you know, going and seeing what our DNA sort of points us to in terms of ancestral gods. That's what we're reconnecting with in terms of learning how to use our magic. And he's saying, but to release, you know, it's a karmic thing, to release yourself, to reconnect to those gods. You're not going to, like he's saying, when they took the gods of others, they lost their gods themselves. And so it's a two-step process. You release the gods of others, and then you get your gods yourself. Because everyone's God should be like alive and healthy and available for people to find their magic through. I don't know what that means, but that's really cool. And so, you know, desire should be about, I want to find my magic. I want to reconnect with my magic. I want to learn how to use my magic. Like your creativity, your area of giftedness to a maximum. I want to step into my power. I want to step into my ability to create and to learn from my divinity through and access to the divinity like that exists. That I was created through. And so this is supposed to be the new desire, and it's a spiritual desire. And with that spiritual desire, like all other things come, all other levels of healing like arrive. And so that's a very pure place to be of being. So he says, you know, what is this judgment day? This judgment day is when the shift when there's a shift out of, I want to meet my basic needs and find security and escape, you know, and escape the trap of just meeting my basic needs and security. I want the escapism to do creative things, visit places, have a creative experience, like moving from like these individual things that we're trying to attain and going and saying, you know what, all my focus or most of my focus is now going to go to wanting the spiritual revolution, because that will get me the time to travel and create through meeting new people through travel. That will get me the freedom from being enslaved. And so to just move your desire from like little moments of relief to like, how can we just relieve the whole for ourselves and everybody else? And so that's like bringing your creativity into healing what has occurred within people through conquering and consuming. healing that. So using your spiritual gifts to reconnect and then begin to heal that for yourself, because as you heal it for yourself spiritually, you're healing it for everybody else spiritually. So he's like, this is Judgment Day. This is the resurrection. This is bringing the dead. He's like, we don't take care of our dead. That's a disaster. You know what I mean? He's like, this is bringing everything back into a place of like vibrant life. Yeah. That was a confirming stomach growl. And so that's what we're doing. And so that's sort of like, what is Judgment Day? Judgment Day is when you make this judgment that says, I'm no longer a slave, and I'm no longer going to live by the edicts and the systems of control and the systems of fear of slavery. And so when we make that decision, and when we start to have this clarity around what it is to create this new road, then we kind of have to confront fear. And that's where we're going with this. So what does it mean to slay this dragon of fear about, you know, our survival, our social inclusion, if we decide to have, you know, to explore and to learn about the stories and the belief systems of our heritage, and change our goal from mere survival to really wanting to make that connection with the divine, and to co-create with the divine. So to co-create with the divine, you really have to get like, so the fear sort of governs your access to the divine, you know, and if you're interacting with a god, or if you're interacting with magic, the fear is that the evil will consume you if you spend too much time with, like, you know, don't entertain spirits, because then they're going to start popping up everywhere. There's all kinds of things in which like the system of control has informed us to be afraid. But he's saying that the demons that scare you when you're looking at like new religions, they let you in to your magic just enough to scare you away from it. And so you have to understand that there's a game here, and it's you know, learning how to, and there are other readings where you can learn, like, you know, some of the basic tenets of spiritual warfare in terms of like, you know, drives aren't intelligent, people are, and it's the drives are working through the people, but you can do the spiritual work to like move the drive out of the way, so you're just dealing with a person. And that's a whole other reading, and I encourage you to go to that. What is it? Who was that? I think that was Mary Magdalene. But you know, with, you know, what it means, this is the Knight of Swords. Taking action on getting yourself unstuck is first removing the fear from the process of exploring spirituality and exploring your magic. And so I want to look at that real fast. Let's get some information. And I'm meant to get other cards to do this. Yeah, this is a change, the world coming bone. A whole worldview, the change of the worldview. So let's get these cards around confronting these fears and what it means to confront these fears. Okay. Okay. The child eternal, this is stepping into your divinity. So one of the first things that we need to understand is, like, you know, archetypes are really helpful. Let me move this lamp just so it's not making a noise. Archetypes are really, really helpful. You know, so there's two, he says, Odin is saying, for every true, good, holy, divine thing, there is a cheap counterfeit that's meant to sort of, that is like the consumable version of that true, free, for everybody thing. There's a consumer version that is meant to trick you into thinking, in order to get this, you need that. That you get to this through that. And so one of the things that Odin wants to say, like, is that you are born eternal. You are born with the sacred as part of what you are, and the sacred will constantly make itself known to you as that which is different than the day-to-day grind, the things that die. So we are getting back to the difference between the sacred and the profane, and the profane is like, it's like the stuff that dies, you know, the day that starts and ends, the task that that you have to do, you know, it's whatever isn't sacred, what isn't holy, what doesn't inspire awe, and what quickly passes away. That's like there's a much bigger way to explain it, but that's like the little bite size that I'm bringing through. But he's saying the sacred is that which makes itself known as something different from the profane, something that is eternal, something that is transcendent, something that does inspire awe, and something that connects you to like a greater truth. And, you know, flow states are a really good example. This is this creativity that comes through and takes the bindings of time, you know, off of you, and allows you to experience what it is to be infinite in that period of creation. And so it's like, these are the sacred things that we experience, you know, when we are interacting with things that inspire us. And so that is yours. You're born with it. You know, that your imagination is a great example of something that you have in such wish with such power, you know, and you're meant to learn your magic, you know, through that, that sense, you know, that entertainment is like the cheap imitation of our imaginations, kind of, and that doesn't mean that entertainment isn't something, but it's not supposed to supplant our God-given spirituality, which there is no barrier to. So, you know, what we're dealing with in terms of overcoming evil, really in relationship to learning who we are and discovering who we truly are, you know, right now, like how like this works is inability to grow up and be responsible, extreme dependency on others for physical security. And that's sort of like everything we talked about. You know, the entertainment, let's just let the confirmation truck roll by, because that's just going to be a noise. I wonder if it's going to take a long time. The garbage is getting picked up. We don't do this in a professional way. This is just like, come over to my house and we'll talk while the garbage goes by. So this, let's think about yeah, there we go. The inability to grow up and be responsible, extreme dependency on others for physical security. Like, that's everything that we were talking about in the way of being enslaved to just getting your basic needs met, and having there be no opportunity to grow into your purpose and into your giftedness and into your connection to the divine through your creative expression, not being able to grow up and really step into your power and step into your adulthood and what it means to truly be an adult, is all because of this demand related to physical security. And so when we first understand that we are debunking this thing that says that we can't survive on our own, that we can't, that we don't have enough creative potential to create our own world in a way that is going to sustain us outside of these oppressive structures, we want to, that's an evil. That's an evil that says that you have to be dependent on these oppressive structures around you in order to survive. That's the name of evil, not the boogie monster that's trying to, you know, scare you out of looking at your ancestral heritage. And to understand that the boogie monster trying to scare you away from looking at your ancestral heritage and your own magic is there, like, you know, to keep the system of you need to be dependent to this one kind of belief system or else. And to understand that what we are moving towards and what it means to fight evil is a determination to remain young in body, mind, and spirit, and the ability to see things with fresh eyes. And so this comes back to this idea of the grieving of lost potential equals aging. You know, that we are determined not to lose this ability to see things with fresh eyes, to not be told what things are and just like that's the new rule and we follow the rule and we don't ask questions, but to begin to think about ability to see things with fresh eyes as the ability to seek answers to questions, to research, to find out for ourselves, to spend time with religious practices that have been developed throughout history. And if not through our lineage directly, you know, some of us were grafted into new systems, and to not be so close-minded about how you do this, but accessing that connection to the divine in a way that feels safe and comfortable for you should not incite fear and should not limit your inquiry. You should always be able to ask more questions and change and build on an existing belief system. That's the creative co-creation with the divine that is the connection to the divine right there. And so to understand that by connecting with to connect to the divine is to follow your curiosity, pick things up, study things, work with them, and your discernment really is it's like fear. What is agitating me and what is giving me peace? What is nourishing me and what is leaving me feeling like I'm not enough and I have to find somewhere else something? You know, there's a way in which we learn and incrementally, and each bite size of knowledge like gives us the sustenance for the next bite size of knowledge, and that's like a peaceful process. When you feel like you don't know how to do it and you're scared because, oh my God, you're not in the process, right? And so we're looking at our fear as being like the agent of discernment, not something that should control us or yeah, like we're not living by the rules of fear. We're using fear as the tool that it is, and it's a tool of discernment. When you notice a fear, it's telling you something, and you want to listen and look around. But it's not. Yeah, there's something to be said for that. So like keeping your ability to see things with fresh eyes is also this eternal youth. In mind, body, and spirit, actually, that there's something that you bring this energy into your cells and they do okay. When you deplete your cells of this energy, it's like taking water out. That's when the aging starts, really, from a spiritual perspective. And so, so what does it mean to begin to see with these new eyes? Like, you know, we have the student, that's what came out first. So all spiritual like leadership should come to you in the he says the honorable robe of student, not like, you know, the teacher really has to remain a constant student, because when we look at determination to keep your viability, like that's like the egg viable, to keep the life alive, you know, that comes from like having wonder, curiosity, and allowing yourself to search freely. He's like the feeling of being a teenager isn't something you're supposed to abandon when, like, you know, that's an artificial process of beginning to die, beginning to watch your potential be taken away from you. And so when we look at like what we have right now, the counterfeit: arrogance in pursuit of destructive knowledge, unwillingness to translate knowledge into action. This is a consuming relationship with the learning process. That you're going to get all this, that you're going to learn this wisdom so that you can put it into this career, so that you can earn, and so that you can dole it out. However, you know, it accommodates earning free time and earning escapism. Think about money as earning escape. To get the knowledge for the purpose of building your mechanisms of escape is not translating knowledge into action. And, you know, we see this complaint all the time politically when people, you know, there are all these theories, these political theories that show us that the way that we're doing things is destructive and cruel and torture. And we have no way of translating that to action. And it leaves us feeling more helpless and more dependent than before we even knew these things. It's like the dog learning English and feeling like they're inferior because they have a different language. I don't know why I'm being shown that dog on TikTok that's learning with the buttons. But, you know, that's something that someone can figure out. I don't know what that means. But the arrogance of the pursuit of destructive knowledge is like knowledge for the sake of creating a product to be consumed so that you can escape being consumed yourself, is not the purpose of why we learn, why we create new information, why we gather the research, find a new way of doing things and put it out there. He's like, that's only part of it. You know, when it comes to consuming this knowledge and being able to translate it into action, the humility and devotion to knowledge and an openness to lifelong learning. That when we think about what it is to learn, that this should be a lifelong thing, because this is the nourishment, this is real nourishment, this is real sustenance. And that as we learn and we take in that learning, as we follow our curiosity, like to begin to think about learning is not something that you just like do when you pick up a book, but to think about that you are in a school, and that everywhere you look and every problem you are faced with, to think about every problem that you are faced with as a reason for a period of learning and then initiation out of that problem. That this is like he's saying this is religious work. And so to begin to think about your knowledge as being something that A, is ongoing and in development, B, to think of yourself as being the pinnacle of wisdom in a given area so that you can then dole out what is right and what is wrong. This is the misuse of knowledge. It should be going into action, and it should be translated in a way that can be used. It can actually, you know, offer something valuable. And so, you know, as we like open ourselves to learning as being part of what should be a primary goal, learning and experiences and being able to learn through experiences, he says, should be a lot more important than the size of your house. You know, as long as you've got enough, everything else should be actually diverted less into stuff and more into, and he says, especially stuff that gives you quote unquote status. Like that's the lie version. But to think about it is like, how can I cultivate a lifelong experience of always learning, always evolving, always expanding, and having all of that translate into changes in my life that produce different outcomes? To sort of step into that as being like the first way to overcome fear is to develop a relationship with learning, and that also includes like developing your spiritual senses. He said, as above, so below. There is a war on you stepping out of consumerism. You are going to encounter these principalities of keeping things the same, of perpetrating this consumerism, because you are going to see that whatever it is that your divine spark is, it's going to want to be consumed by the system that can profit off of it. And so that doesn't mean that profit is bad. That doesn't mean that money is bad. We need it to do the things that we do. But the spiritual practice is about learning and translating that learning into changes in our lives, and like, you know, whatever it is we have to give people by way of what we co-create with the universe and with the divine and with each other. And so that if we are in this habit of constantly learning, and that act of constantly learning, which is a rebellion into itself, and getting up in the morning and connecting with your deities and connecting with your higher self and saying, I'm here to learn, teach me something, is a really good way to start off in terms of what it means to get out of fear and what it means to be free of fear. Because fear is the system's mode of control. And so we begin to loosen that control of ourselves when we begin to see new ways and experience new things and step back into that eternal youth of constant novelty being a part of our experience. And the way to get there is to first say, I don't know everything. I know nothing. You want to know how you enter that space? I know nothing. I know nothing. And to start with that. And that means being open to what you don't know. That's not the misuse of information. You can be sure about something. This is the teacher. You know, we move from a student, and being a student is also, you know, being a student should also be what you learn, you teach. What you figure out on your own, you deliver. It's part of building community. It's part of building relationship. It's the creativity of taking a concept, figuring it out for yourself, having your own perspective on it, and then delivering it so that other people, he's like, it's a new kind of commerce, isn't it? He's like, it's a new currency. You know, this wisdom that you can always partake of and then deliver, that it's free for everybody, and that having to have your opinions be right and other people's opinions be wrong, that's a misuse, because then that's trying to control instead of just, you know, synthesize and deliver. And he's like, and this is why we need the spirit of humility, and we all need it, so that when we're delivering information that we say, I don't need to be right. I'm learning like you are. If this is useful for you, if you can make use of it, if you can take it and create something new for yourself with whatever it inspires within you, that's all that its job is. Its job isn't being right. Its job is inspiration. If it doesn't inspire, then it's not doing its job, and you can just ignore it, flick it away. You know, if it has the power to influence somebody else in a way that is destructive, then again, you know, in numbers, be part of the community that doesn't do that, and it creates a space for people that make that wrong turn. They might have to learn something in that wrong turn and then bring that wisdom back. And so you let people be at their pace, and you be at your pace, and you escape consuming by trying not to sell what you've got, but offer it freely in the way of wisdom. And that it will compensate you in its own way. That's the magic. That's using your magic brings this magic to whatever it is that you're doing in alignment that compensates you, because that's the natural order of things. And when you get in that divine alignment with learning, you start to begin to see how you're compensated and how you can compensate how you can be compensated for what it is that you're bringing into the world as this co-creation and perspective. And action means what you make of the relationships, what you make of the innovation and the inspiration. And so to enter into the space of being a student is also to understand that you work your way into everything you learn. You also teach by your conduct, you know, and by your conduct first and your words after. And so the shadow age, like, what is it to have the counterfeit that we're dealing with, you know, that's part of this consuming? You know, the counterfeit is manipulating or abusing students, teaching negative traits and destructive skills. You know, the schoolhouse that teaches you to be in a factory that is no longer useful, you know, like, that's manipulating the learning process so that it can serve something else. you know, to make the learning process serve, something other than, you know, each individual's expansion and creativity is to try and make it produce something for consumption. And so we're going to take that learning process out of, I'm teaching, and it's so that everybody can fall in line with this belief that then that belief will gain traction, and then people will come to it, and then like the exchange, to get it out of exchange and just say, I'm learning and then I'm teaching as I interact, and this spreads it and this gives it for free and it's nourishing, and what it is that I specialize in, you know, in my area of giftedness will compensate me. You might not know in the student phase, but you'll figure it out in the teacher phase. And so as you learn that, those lessons begin to produce something of their own accord, and what they produce of their own accord, this is like the new supply and demand that we create out of the system of oppression in order to bring revolution. And so, and that revolution isn't violent, not with this, it doesn't need to be, it's unnecessary. That's the old way that keeps you from change. I can't change because the old way will become violent, you know, and I'll have to fight it. You know what I mean? Like, you know, or we just introduce the new way, the new road, and let the old road dry up and let it crumble under its lack of demand. And so, you know, to move into the light attribute of this archetype is the ability to communicate knowledge, experience, skill, or wisdom. And that's what we're doing as we learn, and as we and figure things out, and develop things and give things to people. And if you're worried about what that means in terms of the oppressive systems of control that tell you what is right and what is wrong, and you don't want to bring that into the world by way of your opinion, so there's a lot of ambivalence. I'm speaking to somebody in particular. You know, just you can very easily use the spell, and Odin says spell, prayer. You bring the magic of, I'm learning this and I think it might be useful to you, you know, do with it what you may. You know, just delivering things in that way does absolve you from like the curse of like the having to be right, and having to know and keep it the same. You know, you actually can bring in an openness and a spaciousness with whatever you teach as part of teaching in a correct way that not only gives you the right to constantly learn and grow if you teach that way. And so this ability to communicate your knowledge, your experience, your skill, or your wisdom, that becomes a new ecosystem of commerce. It's a new kind of currency that isn't controlled the way that consumer control. And so, you know, he says, Odin is saying, like, you know, as we enter the cycle as a student, we exit the cycle as contributing that knowledge, communicating that skill, delivering that wisdom. That's the teacher cycle. And then we move into the leadership cycle. And so when we think of hierarchy as being something that you have to, like, you know, be given access to through a system of oppression, and that you have to sacrifice, you know, in order to have whatever position you end up with. He's like, when you move out of that, and think about hierarchy as a system of, like, he's like, hierarchy is wrong as a system of governing, and right as a system of initiation, you know, and learning. And so, like, you know, we enter as a student and we move into the role of a teacher, we move into using our skills in different ways. You know, as we sort of like move through teacher, and, you know, in the healthy way, in the light attribute, we end up in the ruling position, because then we take all the things that we have learned and we have taught and we have found work versus don't work, because we will test our theories of learning on you know, like, the more people, like, taking a piece of wisdom and, you know, finding it in whatever, you know, learning process you're in, and then translating it into you know, knowledge that can be accessed by others. Others will then look at that knowledge, and it's a little bit like the scientific method. They'll look at that knowledge and they'll test it. And if you have this openness around conversation and openness around letting things evolve, like, you know, through you, then you're going to be able to start to see how the ideas, you know, will present themselves as either working or not working, as either needing to be created through more into something that will work, or something that needs to be abandoned so something else can come in. And when we start to understand that this is the teaching phase of our spiritual evolution, at a certain point we'll see that, like, all of those things worked. Now we can see, like, that's when you bring healthy leadership in. And so you know, the healthy queen, healthy leadership is reading, and this is in particular with the divine feminine, this is in community, this is in being able to give and receive, radiates the regal feminine, uses her benevolent authority to protect others. And so when we think about, you know, we started this TikTok with this idea about divine masculinity and healing divine masculinity. you know, the divine masculinity is about agency. It's about using tools. It's about creating from like structure. It's like a different kind of process, and that ruling should be more of a feminine community process than like, instead of the rule of control, the rule of the mother. And that, you know, the mother who loves the community, that loves their children and wants the best for everybody and wants everybody to grow and be healthy, that this is how rulership should actually operate, much more in the divine feminine energy than in the divine masculine energy, because conquering related to consumption is divine masculine gone completely awry, made toxic, and it makes them sick. Odin says it makes them sick. It makes the divine masculine in you sick, and it makes the divine masculine in them sick. It shouldn't be related to consuming. That divine masculine is a very different role, but in terms of leadership, that it should be much more in the spirit of the mother, the divine feminine energy. And so then, you know, when we have effective leadership, because the shadow attribute, let's look at the shadow attribute of what leadership could be. The shadow attribute is what we're dealing with right now. The false toxic version is to become arrogant when authority is challenged. You know, anytime the authority of a given groupthink is challenged, there's an arrogance. I'm right, you're wrong. My view is going to consume your view so that there's more of my view. And so that we have, this is what we're doing. Controlling and demanding. Like, you have to do it my way or else you're on the outside. Like, that's the wrong... That's actually the misuse and the perversion of like the idea of like, this is what divine masculine energy, like this is the sickness that we're in. But to understand that, to become a student, to become a teacher, to test these things and then begin to like work with them in a way of like, you know, rulership for the benefit of all, is to be in this benevolent authority that protects others with what you've learned and what you know, and how you have you know, gotten this level of mastery over any given thing. And so like, this is what it means to overcome fear, is to understand that your process isn't compromised. This is a natural process, that you're free to do all of these things, that this is your natural mode of expansion and contributing, and that you're never being asked more than you can give. You're never going to have demanded of you more than you're ready to. In this way, it's safe. And to see that there is this natural way of doing things, this natural way of getting your needs met, this natural way of being nourished, and this natural way of finding your giftedness. That you don't, there shouldn't be some tyranny of the urgent, some fear related to produce, or else you're going to lose your creative anything. This is a way of life. It is a lifestyle of creativity. And so, you know, and so when the things that we have created are then put in a position where they're able to help, you know, create a structure for others, and this queen, you know, of the mother, who then, like, you know, creates the space for to make this something that everybody can access easily and take part in, because again, human potential is our greatest asset. We graduate into this. This is the spirituality. You know, the monk nun. You know, this light attribute is selfless devotion and single-minded dedication to spirit. You know, when you get to a place where everything else is established, and you can dedicate yourself to communing with that divine, to allowing the divine to be the predominant energy that you operate through, that's bringing God into the world, for your creations, being a representative of God on earth. That's bringing this divine energy and being the personification. And Odin is showing me, like, he's trying, he said Valhalla, like, those warriors that you get to be a god, you get to be immortalized when you have been the student and have been the teacher and have been in this position of rulership, and that you don't get this because you were born to wealthy people. that creates a horrendous nightmare of a situation. He's like, talk about a trap. Rulership that you're not ready for. The hate that you're going to get everywhere you go is unmatched. You know, that's the price that you pay for being in a position that you have no way of operating from fairly and justly and with an ability to do this. So, because it's been tested, because your methods have been tested. But when we move into the spiritual space, it's because we've done this. And then we actually begin to, like, you know, we look at the world, there's no God. You know, evil is everywhere. Nobody's going to be okay. We all need to come into line of these structures that are all about consumption in order to save ourselves, you know, from that which eats your stability monster, you know. But that when we go through this natural process and we end up here, there is a God. There are authorities on the earth to turn to that can bring forth fair and benevolent ideology, actually, you know. And so that's basically, you know, when we understand that the demons and good and evil, like, is anything that would oppose your growth in this way. And so anything that would oppose your growth in this way is the true evil. And the boogeyman that scares you because of its face, what's its purpose? Why is it doing that? Why would, and I'm saying, why would the demon stand in your room and scream at you and hold you down? What would be their purpose in that? Is it going to make you worship them? No. No, it isn't. Is it going to, it's going to make you run back to the god of oppression, you know, where you have to be consuming that belief system and feeding it and putting your effort towards it because it's the only right one. It's like, that's its job. So when you know that that's its job and you know that it cannot actually hurt you, then you can turn to this energy and you can say, I am going to grow. I am going to expand. I am going to continue to learn. And you can bet your bottom dollar that my human potential, which is unmatched in the universe in some ways, can put you at your energy, can flick you away. What are you? You're just the opposition to my growth. You're just trying to consume what it is that I have to offer. But I am the epicenter of that thing which is offered. And I can figure out how to cut you off real fast. I can starve you by making you not my master, by not bowing down to this fear that says I need to shut down my line of inquiry. I have to shut down my connection to the divine. You take control over, you know, your purpose, which is to learn in this way and to become, yes, you're meant for something big. You feel that really deeply. I'm meant for something big. You're meant for something big. This is what you're meant for. Your area of giftedness has something for the world that is of God-like benefit. And that's just the truth of who you are. And so one of the first ways that we overcome this confusion and this fear is to not be confused about who we are. You might be in a student phase right now, but you're still this. This is still your growth trajectory. This is still like, it's like, you know, being a child and knowing you're going to grow up. Being where you are and knowing you're going to get there. Isn't questioning whether it's possible if you can get there. Isn't wondering whether the outside circumstances of your life are going to allow you to get there. Knowing you have access to this right now and you can start operating in this right now and that this will absolutely provide for you. It is what alignment actually means, is starting to starve this. Because now you're putting your energy towards this process and you're taking your energy out of that process, and that process will starve. It will crumble. This is how you overcome the opposition. This is how you let that tower fall. And so, you know, when we move over here to, that's how we unstuck. You know, we start with the mind, we start with the spirit, we start with inquiry, and that's how we get out of this position of being stuck. That doesn't mean we're not up against something. Let's get cards on this. Let's see what we want to use here. I need to take a breath and have a little sip of water. If you need to take a break at this time, it is 1:11 on the clock exactly. I love synchronicities. I absolutely love synchronicities. So we might want to take a break right now. In fact, I'm going to shut this off and come back.